A lot of you are interested in starting a nonprofit, specifically around therapy practice or another wellness practice. And I wanted to teach you all, if you're new to this, the exact steps and essentials that you need to legally set up your structure. For those of you that are new to my group, my name is Dr. Lauren Lawson. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and approved clinical supervisor in Pennsylvania and California. So I started my nonprofit group therapy practice 13 years ago in California. We've been operating that long, and now we're up and running in Pennsylvania as well. So we are in both states. So as I go through this training, feel free to comment. I'll answer any questions that come in live. If you're watching the replay and you have questions, comment and I'll get back to you. If you want to private message me about anything that you need help with, let me know. I'm happy to help in DMs as well. So let's dive in. Today I'm going to break down everything you need to know about the different entity types as a nonprofit, the IRS requirements, what you need to actually get established, and the realistic timeframes that you're looking at, especially with our new administration and delays that might be happening with staff shortages now within the IRS. As we know, there was a lot of cutbacks with that. So that does affect some things, but not as much as you may think. So I'll dive into what that means and what it looks like for you. So one thing that you need to know from the get-go in establishing your nonprofit is the entity type. There's a couple of different types that you can structure your nonprofit as, but there's two main ones that you'd be looking at. The first one is the one that I recommend and that over 90% of nonprofits do, and that's a nonprofit corporation. So it's really getting incorporated at the state level. And the reason why 90% of people do this is because it exists separately from its founders and directors, so it provides liability protection and it allows the organization to continue regardless of the leadership. That sometimes scares a lot of people, but it's actually protection for you, and it is also, think of it as your legacy continuing after you step down or retire. So again, this is the most common structure for nonprofit therapy practices, is this nonprofit corporation at the state level. So creating this registration is something that you do separately than the tax exempt status from the IRS. And oftentimes this is required in order to get that tax exempt status from the IRS. So this is your first step that you're going to do when you're setting the essential foundation that you need for your nonprofit, is registering with your state as a nonprofit corporation. As a nonprofit corporation, it's governed by a board of directors, and those board of directors have 3 fiduciary responsibilities, and that is duty of obedience, duty of, now they're going out my brain, duty of obedience, I want to say duty to warn, but obviously that's clinical and under terror self. I'm blanking on it, just having a brain moment, but there's 3 fiduciary responsibilities. I just did a training on this under Board Structure 101. So if you want to go back and refresh, if you go under the guide section, I go over those fiduciary responsibilities in detail. The second type of entity that you can establish as a nonprofit, it doesn't really apply to therapy practices, but you might see this sometimes, so I just want to explain it, and that's a charitable trust. As therapy practices, we are not, we may work with a charitable trust, but we're not registering as a charitable trust. So basically a charitable trust is when there's a legal arrangement where the assets are held by one party, and that's a trustee, and that's for the benefit of a charitable purpose. So it's governed by a trust document versus a nonprofit corporation, which is governed by bylaws. So an example of where you might see this in regards to a therapy practice is if there's a major donor and they have a lot of money and they establish a trust to fund ongoing therapy services for a specific population. Your nonprofit may benefit from those funds, but those funds are managed by a trust. So as a therapy group practice, you wouldn't, this is not how you would set up your business entity, but you may end up working with this entity. There's 2 other types of entities that you could get set up as, but I don't recommend this. Hardly anybody does it, and it doesn't guarantee 501c3 status with the IRS, and that's an unincorporated association. This is not recommended because there's no liability protection. There's no separate legal existence from you or you and the board of directors and the business. So it's not recommended, and it doesn't guarantee that you're going to get the IRS designation. Most of the time you need that corporation status to get the IRS approval. The other thing you can do is you can have an LLC that is established as a nonprofit, but again, it's not recommended because it may not be approved by the IRS. And in that case, then what happens is you're a legal nonprofit at the state level, but you don't have that tax exemption from the IRS, which is ideally, right, the main benefit of starting a nonprofit is that you're tax exempt. So those are the different types of entity structure. So what I teach in my program is getting established as a corporation at the state level first. And so I'll go through what that filing process looks like step by step, so that if you want to look it up on your own and look at your own state requirements, I definitely recommend doing that. The first thing you need is your articles of incorporation. Your articles of incorporation are basically listing out the purpose of your organization and stating that it is a charitable organization. You file it with your Secretary of State, and there is a filing fee. Usually it ranges between $50 to $150. The turnaround time for approval is 2 to 6 weeks, but honestly, for a lot of states, it's much, much quicker. It can be like a 48-hour turnaround, and you have your approval for the nonprofit corporation in your state. Now, filing the actual articles of incorporation with the Secretary of State looks different, and the application is different for every state. I've seen so many of these. Some of them you actually have to have a separate document that is your articles of incorporation. Some states want you to fill out the online application, and you're not uploading your own document. You fill out a form online, and they then create the articles of incorporation based on that application. I know the state of Texas does that. With California, you actually upload your articles of incorporation yourself. So what I do in my program is I give you a template so that you have articles of incorporation to work from. And with that, you need to identify at least minimum 3 board of directors. Not every state requires that you list the board of directors, but there is a good amount of states out there that actually want you to list the board of directors, meaning you need to have their name, their role on the board, and usually phone number and address. So the states require that information. They don't have to actually live in that state, but you do need a minimum of 3 to form a board of directors for a nonprofit corporation. If you don't have it for the articles of incorporation, your state doesn't require that, you're still going to need it for the IRS application, which I'll go through in a minute. After you file with your state, you can apply for an EIN. Honestly, you could apply for an EIN before you file with the state. It doesn't matter which order you go in, but please just go to the IRS website. It's free. It takes like 2 seconds to fill out that application, and you then have an EIN associated with your nonprofit, with the articles that you filed through the Secretary of State. And really, that's all you need to get your business up and running with the nonprofit. So that part is actually pretty super simple and pretty easy and fast. And that's what you need to actually start business. After you do that, and that's out of the way, then you're going to start diving into actually getting that tax exempt status from the IRS. That is going to be 2 applications, which I'll go through in a minute. But you'll need to have bylaws. So your bylaws are basically the organization's top level policies that govern the board. So they're basically policies and procedures that the board of directors has to follow. They're not your operational policies, so it's not like your HR policy or your clinical policy. This is more of how the board needs to operate to stay in compliance with the IRS. So in my program, because bylaws are usually I think mine are like 10 to 20 pages long, but and sometimes states have specific requirements for your bylaws that they require in there. So I tailor the bylaws, but I give you a template for the bylaws for you to kind of work off of, so you're not creating it from scratch and wondering, is this going to get approved by the IRS? I have everything in there that you need for approval. So you'll want to start working on your bylaws, and then once you have your bylaws, you don't file them with the state, you file them when you do the 1023 application, which I'll talk about in a minute. But once you have your bylaws created, you're going to organize your first board meeting, and you're going to have the board approve the bylaws, and you're going to document that in the board meeting minutes. So I know this kind of sounds like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of work, but it's actually not. It's kind of like all of you who have been in private practice or even community mental health, you've all been in meetings where you're kind of reviewing things together. This is almost the same thing. There's different procedures that you follow as a board of directors, but there's so many resources out there on how to do this correctly. And as long as you document it in the meeting minutes, then it happened and it's legal. And I have a whole structure for this that breaks it down very easy within my course. And it's an online course, self-study, that you can do at your own pace. So once your bylaws are done, you're going to have a board meeting. You're going to have the board approve the bylaws. It doesn't mean that's set in stone forever. You can always have a board meeting to amend any bylaws. So I always tell people to keep that in mind. We're not making hard and fast decisions forever here. We're getting it started and up and running and good enough to get approved by the IRS. So what's important to understand is that your nonprofit corporation exists legally at the state level once your articles of incorporation are approved, but you don't have that tax exemption until the IRS approves your 501c3 application. So what does this mean for actually operating? This means that once your articles are approved by the state, you can start operating right away. So you can start seeing clients under that business. You can start credentialing with insurances. You can obtain your MPI-2 if you don't already have that. You can credential with Medicaid. You can see cash clients. You can start fundraising, actually. So there's a couple things with that, though. While you're in this in-between stage, I always encourage people, get your business up and running right away. Start operating right away. Don't wait. We don't want to wait on the IRS, but we kind of want to do both things at the same time. You want to prep your 1023 application because you don't want to put that off. But if you already have clients that you want to put into this business, start doing it. Like I said, all you need is your articles approved by the state. You need your EIN. A lot of times you need your MPI-2. And then, we all know how long insurance can take. So start those applications right away. You can accept donations at this point, but they're not tax deductible yet for your donors. But once you get that IRS approval, usually the date is retroactive, and then you can go back and provide receipts that is tax deductible for those donors. You can also apply to grants at this level, and a lot of places that issue grants will accept nonprofits that their status is pending with the IRS. So during this time, it's really important to maintain documentation of all the business that you're doing. You want to track your donations and expenses, because that way you can go back and provide those receipts to those people. And then you're going to operate as if you're a nonprofit. So you're going to operate at that point, once your articles are approved, as a nonprofit, not as a for-profit therapy practice. This means that you need to be transparent and in compliance with the IRS rules and regulations and the state level. So again, you can start seeing clients as sliding scale under this, seeing insurance. You do want to get in your application with the IRS pretty quickly, though. So let's talk about that real quick. The 501c3 application process, there's two main options. There's the 1023 EZ, and then there's the full 1023 application. The 1023 EZ is very streamlined. It's a 3-page form. The filing fee is much less expensive. It's $275. This is for organizations who expect less than $50,000 annually in revenue for the first 3 years. So if you are totally new to a nonprofit, you're not transitioning your for-profit into a nonprofit, and you're starting a nonprofit from the ground up, and you kind of want to take it slow and build over several years, then this option is for you. You can do the EZ application. Again, it's cheaper and it's for a slower buildup. But if you are transitioning your for-profit into a nonprofit, or you're anticipating on building up very quickly, then you have to do the full 1023 application. You don't want to skirt around it and do the easy, even though it's cheaper, because if you end up making more than 50,000 in revenue in the next 3 years, then your 501c3 status could be at risk. So you don't want to put that at risk and just do the full 1023 application. This is a pretty comprehensive application, and this is where a lot of people start to feel overwhelmed in the process. And that's because this application is like 30 pages and it's a $600 filing fee. But this is required for organizations who expect to make more than 50,000 in revenue over the next 3 years of their nonprofit. So if any of you already have a for-profit, you're probably already making over 50,000 gross in revenue, and you need to apply with the 1023 long application. This does require detailed narratives about the nonprofit, budget, and like activity descriptions. And if you're transitioning from a for-profit into a nonprofit, you do need your financial information for your for-profit in order to fill out the 1023. This is where I come in significantly and help you do this, either in my Done For You package or my course, but I walk you through this so that you're getting the approval the first time and it's not getting denied, and you don't feel overwhelmed with the questions. I know these questions inside and out. I think I've done since January myself. I think I've helped out and filled out at least 6 1023 full length applications. So I kind of know this application like the back of my hand at this point and can walk you through that process. So again, for most therapy startups, you can do the 1023 EZ. But and that's like the pro of that is that it's faster approval process. The timeline for that is about 2 to 3 months, and honestly, probably even sooner. When you do the full 1023, which you should do if you're already seeing clients, that's a longer approval process, and the timeline has increased in the last couple of months with the staffing shortages. So we don't know what that will look like. Obviously, that's out of my control, but what I can do is help you get that application in ASAP so that you can start operations and not have to worry about doing that application, because there is a turnaround time that you need to have that in by if you are starting operations after you have done your articles of incorporation. So again, I recommend the full 1023, but if you are a startup, you can do the 1023 EZ, and it is shorter and cheaper. So right now they say the processing time for the full 1023 is 9 to 12 months. I know that sounds long. I don't think that's fully accurate. I had someone in my program get their approval within 3 weeks. That's typically what I see. But I think with the new administration and a lot of the layoffs that have happened, we know cuts have been made in the IRS. I do think we're seeing a longer timeline than 3 weeks. I just had one of my other clients call, and I think she got the message that it was like going to be up to 180 days. But again, I always encourage people to keep operating. You still can operate once your articles are approved. So don't let this stop you. But get in this application ASAP. Like, don't sit on this. Let's just get it done. Don't let it overwhelm you. We'll get it in and out of the way, because once it's done, you never have to think about it again. And again, the pro is that there is retroactive tax exemption. So this is the timeline that I was talking about, though. If you need to file the 1023 within 27 months of your incorporation date in order to have a retroactive 1023 501c3 status. So what I mean by that is, like, let's say you incorporate in January of 25, so you're in full operation, and you submitted your 1023 in February, okay, but the IRS doesn't approve it until, let's just say worst case scenario, like December of 2025. When they approve it in December, they're going to retroactively backdate it to February. To January, when your articles were approved, because that's within 27 months of completing that application. So again, that's where you can go back. You can still collect donations. And once you're approved in December and they retroactively approve it back to January, you can provide receipts to your donors. That's why you need to track it. And that is a tax deduction for those donors. So this is why I say, like, don't wait. Don't worry about the IRS being slow. Things are retroactive, and just get it in ASAP so you can start operating and serving your community. So that's the application and the essentials so far. So just a quick recap: articles of incorporation, you're going to incorporate as a nonprofit. You file that at the Secretary of State level, which means you need to have your articles of incorporation, your 3 board members. You need to have your bylaws done, which are the governing policies for your board. And then you're going to complete the 1023 application to get that tax exempt status. And in that in-between period, you can start operations. And the turnaround time for the Secretary of State to get your articles approved is like 48 hours. Sometimes it's 2 to 3 weeks, but I've been seeing it across the board in all the states that I've been working in 48 hours. So that's how quickly you can start business. Some common pitfalls to avoid though in this process: you want to make sure that your purpose of the nonprofit has clear language on why you're serving the community and how you're serving the community. Any inadequate language is going to result in denials, and you don't want that to happen. You want to make sure you have the proper board composition. If you haven't watched my training on Board 101, go back under the guides, it's in there. But you can't have people who are related to each other more than 49% on the board. And you can't have too few board members. So you need at least 3, and no more than 49% can be related. So you can have some people related, but no more than 49%, which is a weird percentage. So if you have 3 people, 2 people are related, that's probably not going to fly. And you have to have another board member or 2 other board members to make that work, or just have someone who's not related to you on the board. You need to have sufficient detail in your program description. This is why your mission and vision is so important to do first. And again, I have other trainings on mission and vision, but you do need your mission and vision, because in that 1023 application, you have to write out descriptions on what exactly you're doing. It can't just be, we're doing therapy services. It has to be more detailed than that. So you want to make sure you're not having insufficient detailed in program description. The other thing that you need to have is a conflict of interest policy. This is a template that I give you in my course, but you want to make sure you have a really clear conflict of interest policy that meets the requirements for the IRS, or else this is going to result in denials too. So these are the common pitfalls to avoid. You want to make sure you have clear language. You want to make sure your program descriptions are sufficient. You want to make sure you meet the requirements for the board composition, and you want to make sure you have a strong conflict of interest policy. All right, so I wanted to make this super short and sweet today. That's everything I have under the essentials to legally structure your nonprofit group practice. So some next steps for you to do are to research your state-specific incorporation requirements, because it's different for every state. Gather your founding board members, so minimum of 3. Draft clear and compelling purpose statements. That means your mission and vision statement. And then start working on your bylaws and that 1023 application once you register with the state. So if any of you are interested in working with me, I can help you with all this. I do it on a varying different levels. You can get access to just my course, which is self-study, gives you all the templates that you need, no coaching. You can do it all on your own. Let me know if you're interested in that. Or you can do a done for you package where I come in and I do everything for you. Plus I give you 2 coaching calls and I help you fill out the applications. You file on your own and you have to pay the filing fees, but I help you do everything else. And I give you a detailed business plan with a roadmap of at least 3 years to build out your nonprofit. That package is $997. And then I have a full coaching program. So that's access to the course, that's access to my Done For You package, and that's access to everything else in the course that'll set you up for success, plus lifetime access to that, and group coaching with me for 12 weeks to get you up and running and off the ground. That package is $3,900, and you get 2 bonuses with it on Instagram and Facebook marketing for nonprofits and fundraising. And then also a grants and fundraising 101 for therapists that was done by a grant writer who has worked in nonprofit mental health her whole career. So if you're interested in any of those, just drop a comment. I'll send you the link. I'll also post it in the comments. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Comment on this as you're going through it. or you can DM me if you have any questions that you come across in regards to filing the paperwork. Otherwise, let's go and do this. This is, it sounds like a lot, but once you know the process, it's actually pretty easy and pretty quick. You can get off the ground and up and running with your nonprofit. So happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, happy Saturday, and I'll see you next Friday for our next live training. All right, have a good weekend, everyone.